Summary of Lady Windermere's Fan by Oscar Wilde. The first scene of the play takes place in London, where a young woman named Lady Windermere is seen arranging roses in her morning room. Parker, her butler, informs that Lord Darlington has arrived to see her, and she welcomes him in. She makes it clear that any visitors are welcome. Lord Darlington walks in and looks at Lady Windermere's beautiful fan, which she says was a gift from her husband for her birthday. She is having a party that night because it is her birthday. The next thing that happens is that Lady Windermere warns him for showering her with so many lavish praises, and she informs him that she believes he is truly a very decent guy despite the fact that he acts to be a very horrible one. Lord Darlington then makes fun of Lady Windermere's strict morals and says that he hopes they will become very good friends. She explains why she thinks the way she does and stresses that bad people should never be forgiven for their mistakes. Parker says that the Duchess of Berwick and her daughter Agatha have also come to visit. Lord Darlington leaves after he has talked with the women for a while. The Duchess then tells Lady Windermere the real reason for her visit. She wants to tell her about reports that her husband, Lord Windermere, has been spending a lot of time with a scandalous woman named Mrs. Erlynne and even giving her money. The Duchess says that all the men in London society, including her brother Augustus, are in love with Mrs. Erlynne, even though she has a strange past and no family ties. Lady Windermere doesn't believe that her husband would do something like that, but the Duchess says that it's true and tells her to take Lord Windermere out of town to confuse him. The Duchess and Agatha leave. Agatha hasn't said much the whole time. When Lady Windermere is alone, she is shocked to find a locked bank book with proof that her husband paid Mrs. Erlynne. When Lord Windermere walks in, she talks to him, but he tells her she doesn't understand what's going on. Lady Windermere doesn't want to hear it and says she feels very hurt and cheated. At this point, Lord Windermere tells her that he needs a favor from her. He wants her to invite Mrs. Erlynne to the party so that she can get back into good society. He says that Mrs. Erlynne has made mistakes in the past, but deserves a second shot. Lady Windermere is too scared to go, so she says no. Lord Windermere then sends the offer himself. Lady Windermere swears that she will hit Mrs. Erlynne in the face with the fan if she does come. At the end of the act, Lord Windermere is alone and feeling hopeless. He doesn't know what to do because Lady Windermere would be devastated if she knew Mrs. Erlynne's real name. The second act starts the same night as the party. Dummy, Cecil Graham, Lady Plymdale, the Duchess, and Agatha are among the people who come to visit. Lord Darlington and Augustus are also there. Augustus goes up to Lord Windermere to ask him for advice. Augustus loves Mrs. Erlynne, but he doesn't know what to do because she doesn't have any family. He's glad to hear that she'll be at the party, because everyone knows that if you know Lady Windermere, you're a decent person. Mrs. Erlynne shows up in the end, all dressed up. Lady Windermere is so shocked that she drops her fan and politely greets Mrs. Erlynne. Then she leaves with Lord Darlington, calling herself a coward. The other guests talk excitedly about Mrs. Erlynne, who quickly makes friends with them. She charms Cecil Graham's decent aunt Lady Jedburgh and spends her time dancing with Lord Windermere to make Augustus jealous. In the meantime, Lady Windermere tells Lord Darlington how upset she is. She tells him that she feels duped by Lord Windermere and that she does need a friend after all. Lord Darlington tells her that she can't stay with a husband who treats her so badly, and when she agrees that this might be true, he tells her that he loves her. She is shocked and tells him there's no way she can run away with him. Lord Darlington goes, telling her that he's leaving England in the morning and they won't see each other again. As the party winds down, many of the guests say how much they like Mrs. Erlynne's charm. The Duchess is happy when Agatha gets engaged to Mr. Hopper. It also becomes clear that Augustus has asked Mrs. Erlynne to marry him and that she plans to say yes. She goes to Lord Windermere to ask about the money he promised to give her for her wedding. As she watches them leave together, Lady Windermere feels angry and ashamed. She decides that she shouldn't have said no to Lord Darlington, so she writes a letter to Lord Windermere to tell him she's going. After she leaves, Mrs. Erlynne finds and reads the letter. She is upset because she wrote a similar letter to Lady Windermere's father many years ago. She tells Lord Windermere that Lady Windermere has gone to bed and gives him the letter. Then, she pulls Augustus away and tells him that if he wants her to say yes to his proposal, he needs to take Lord Windermere to the club and keep him busy there. At the start of the third act, Lady Windermere is sad and alone in Lord Darlington's rooms, thinking if she's making the right decision. She is surprised when Mrs. Erlynne comes in and asks her to go back to her husband. Lady Windermere refuses with anger, saying that she might have done it if seeing Mrs. Erlynne again didn't make her so mad. Mrs. Erlynne keeps begging, saying that Lord Windermere loves Lady Windermere and that if she runs away with Lord Darlington, her life will be ruined. Lady Windermere keeps saying no, but she finally gives in when Mrs. Erlynne makes an emotional plea to Lady Windermere's role as a mother and her love for her young son. They get ready to leave, but then they hear voices of men coming closer. Mrs. Erlynne tells Lady Windermere to hide, and the two of them go into hiding. Augustus, Lord Windermere, Dummy, and Cecil Graham walk in with Lord Darlington. They complain about having to leave because of the club, and Lord Windermere tries to tell Augustus that he has to go home. Augustus tells Lord Windermere to stay, and then they talk about how much Augustus loves Mrs. Erlynne. They fight about whether or not she is evil, what her lack of family ties mean, and whether or not it matters whether a woman is good or evil. Cecil says that women will always think men are bad, and Lord Darlington agrees with him wholeheartedly. He admits that he is in love with a good woman who won't have him. Moments later, Cecil sees Lady Windermere's fan lying on the sofa and laughs that Darlington has been talking about love while hiding a woman. Lord Windermere sees the fan and asks Lord Darlington angrily what's going on, threatening to search the rooms if he doesn't get an answer. Just then, Mrs. Erlynne runs out and says she's sorry she took the fan from the party by accident. While the guys are talking to Mrs. Erlynne, Lady Windermere sneaks out of the house without being seen. The next day, the fourth act starts with Lady Windermere back in her morning room by herself. She thinks she should tell Lord Windermere what happened, but she doesn't want to because she thinks talking about it will be worse than going through it. Lord Windermere comes in and tells her that Mrs. Erlynne is just as she said she was. Lady Windermere says Mrs. Erlynne isn't really a bad person and that she has to tell him something, but he cuts her off, telling her to stop thinking about Mrs. Erlynne and focus on their upcoming trip to the country. Lady Windermere says that it's not as easy to tell good people from bad ones as she used to think. Parker comes in and says that Mrs. Erlynne has brought the fan back. Lady Windermere asks Parker to send Mrs. Erlynne inside, even though Lord Windermere tries to stop her. Mrs. Erlynne shows up and says she's sorry for taking the fan by accident. She also says that she's leaving England. She wants to remember Lady Windermere and her baby by looking at a picture of them, so Lady Windermere goes to get one. Lord Windermere accuses Mrs. Erlynne of blackmailing him and says he plans to tell Lady Windermere the truth. Mrs. Erlynne is really Lady Windermere's mother, who she thinks is dead, and she used Lord Windermere's love for his wife to get him to help her get back into polite society. Mrs. Erlynne says she took advantage of her daughter's rich husband, but she won't say she's sorry. She just saw a chance and took it. She also tells him that if he tells Lady Windermere the truth, she'll ruin her image so badly that Lady Windermere will always be sad. Lord Windermere is offended, but Mrs. Erlynne says she loves her daughter and, even though she doesn't want to be a mother, she wants to keep the truth from her to keep her from feeling pain. The picture is brought back by Lady Windermere. Mrs. Erlynne notices that Lady Windermere seems to care a lot about her late mother, and Lady Windermere agrees that her mother is the priceless standard she always tries to live up to. Lord Windermere goes to get Mrs. Erlynne's carriage, and while he's gone, the two women have a quiet moment together. Lady Windermere still wants to tell Lord Windermere the truth, but Mrs. Erlynne talks her out of it by telling her that her happy marriage and her job as a mother should always come first. She also asks if she can keep the fan, which Lady Windermere says is a good thing since they both have the first name Margaret. Augustus comes just as Mrs. Erlynne is going, and she asks him to walk her out while she says goodbye to Lord and Lady Windermere. When they are alone, Lord and Lady Windermere say they love each other and can't wait to see the roses at their country home. Augustus comes back and surprises them by saying that Mrs. Erlynne has told him everything. She only went to Lord Darlington's the night before to look for Augustus because she wanted to accept his proposal. Augustus tells them that he is happy for them and that they are now engaged and will leave England together right away. He is informed by Lord Windermere that he will be marrying a very clever woman, and Lady Windermere joins to say that she is a very good woman.
About the author. Oscar Wilde was born to Sir William Wilde, Ireland's leading eye and ear surgeon, and Speranza, a revolutionary poet and Celtic folklore expert. Wilde himself was a very smart person. He went to both Trinity College in Dublin and Magdalen College in Oxford. When he won the Newdigate Prize in 1878, people first noticed how good an author he was. In 1882, he spent a year traveling and giving talks in America and Canada. During this time, he became a spokeswoman for the English aesthetic movement, which supported art for art's sake. This idea, along with Wilde's view that art is inherently immoral, would come up again and again in his work. Another major theme in many of his works is the revealing of a secret and the shame that comes afterward. Even though Wilde was gay, he was married to Constance Lloyd from 1884 to 1898, and they had 2 children, Cyril and Vivian. Wilde's society comedies were his biggest hits while he was living, but his only book, The Portrait of Dorian Gray, 1891, is the main reason he is known today. His other best-known works, like Lady Windermere's Fan, 1892, Salome, 1893, and The Importance of Being Earnest, 1895, were all written in the last 10 years of his life. From 1895 to 1897, Wilde was in jail because he was a gay. As soon as he got out, he went to France to try to revive his writing career. He only had time to write The Ballad of Reading Gaol in 1898 before he died suddenly in 1900 of what is now usually thought to have been meningitis.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.